gas. So 1% of our atmosphere is actually argon. So the potassium to argon method of dating, not too sound, because gas can move into and out of rocks rather easily. And that distorts the dating that they put on this. Assumption number 3, there's always been a standard rate of decay. In our example, the flow rate of the sand has never varied. In other words, it's never gotten damp, never slowed down. It's always been the constant drip, drip, drip from the top to the bottom. This is an evolutionist, E.A. Olson, made this comment. Support for the consistency of radioactive change comes from both nuclear or dating, comes from nuclear theory and experiment. In the lab, for instance, it's impossible to alter the rate of radioactive decay in any combination of pressure or temperature known to exist within the Earth's crust. In short, process of this radioactive decay is immutable. You can't change it. It's solid. Don't argue with it. It's science. This assumption, like the others, is not sound. Though decay rates in the lab today could be solid, could be the same, it's impossible and even probable that these rates changed in the past, maybe much higher in the past. And this can be shown, for instance, I know this gets deep, but for instance, neutrinos in the rocks have been shown to change in affecting the decay. And this could be caused by something like the flood, for instance. It's recorded in the Bible, and that could have changed it, and these rates could have changed if they're gonna make that claim. So rates can change. Here's some evidence to debunk this. Is there evidence? Yes, there is. There's a rock formed, a lava dome at Mount St. Helens, for instance, which is known to have formed in 1986. It was dated between 0.05 and 0.35 million years old by the potassium to argon method, right there. Lavas on the ocean floor near Kilauea, known to be 200 years old, have been dated by the same method to be 22 million years old. Lava formed by Mount Vesuvius in 1944, dated at 5 to 12 billion years old. Similar rates are given to the Andean lava samples, and it was shown lead was inherent in the lava at formation in these. So that confirms our suspicion that the daughter element can be in these rocks to begin with. Radiometric dating is unreliable at best and outright fraudulent at worst. There are only 2 labs in the US that date this way. And if you send a sample to one of these labs, they ask you your target date, which you right away should send up a red flag to you, okay? Seldom, this is really an astonishing statement, seldom, if ever, do these testing methods, any of them, match. If you run them a second time, you're not going to get the same date. If you compare them to each other, you're not going to get the same date, ever. Okay, and here's the question. If we can't count on this method to date things that we know, like the examples we just showed you, which are 200 years old or 30 years old, or you name it, if we can't count on them to date correctly what makes you think that we can date something we don't know the age of and get a correct answer? Okay. The dates can range from 3 to 400 million years apart, unless you have, say, a fossilized clam. And this is interesting. If you have a fossilized clam that's in their book, you know, that's found near the area you picked up that rock, they'll ask you, do you have something like that? If you do, then the date's going to be, he'll say, well, the date's going to be that clam is 63 million years old or whatever. That's the date of your rock right there. It's confirmed. So that has nothing to do with the dating. It has to do with that presupposition of evolution that's already dated the clam. They look it up in the book, and that's the date. Okay, radiocarbon dating. Any questions on that? I mean, that method is so bogus, but it's in your children's textbooks as being solid, scientific, confirmed methods of dating that give us the millions of years. That's what's going on. Okay, radiocarbon dating, a little different. William Libby discovered this in the 1940s, and he received the Nobel 1960 for this. But he put limits on this. Number one, radiocarbon dating can only date things that once lived, plants and animals that once lived. And the method must be cross-checked for accuracy historically. Well, right there, if it has to be cross-checked, it can only go back so many years. You can't go back a million years and cross-check something. And the maximum age for a fairly accurate dating is between 2,500 and 3,500 years, about the time of the Egyptian dynasty. Beyond this, one cannot check what I just said, and it's useless. It's really useless at that point. This method, here's the description of this method. I'll go real quickly on this because it takes time to really understand this. But radiocarbon dating, there's a ratio between C12 and unstable carbon and C14, and where both are combined with oxygen and presumably remain in a constant proportion. So it's in you and me. As we exchange with oxygen, we have the same proportion of C12 and C14. One's stable, one's unstable. Well, when we pass away, the unstable continues to decay, and the stable one stops. So there's a ratio that keeps, the decaying keeps on. So the ratio keeps getting less and less and less, and you can date the time from time of death by the portion of carbon that continues to decay in the dead, the item that you're trying to date. But you can only do that for so long. That's the theory of carbon dating. Yes. Yes. Ratio stays the same. If it's 2 parts C14 to 1 part C12, that remains in all things theoretically, and they've tested a lot of things, plants, animals, whatever, but the ratio of the carbon, those 2 carbon elements remain pretty much the same as you exchange with oxygen and live. That stays the same. Once you die, then the unstable starts decaying, and that ratio changes, and you then can calculate what, from time of death, is that, so the decay rate. But then next point, conflicts, you still have in a way, has the rate changed? As with radiometric, there are some problems even with that. It's not exempt from the base assumptions used to calculate, particularly when used to pronounce dates exceeding like 25, there's 3,500 years. But the starting condition, the rates of the carbon assimilation, and naturally open system need to be accounted for. And here's some anomalies. Shells of living mollusks, when tested by C14, have revealed ages of 2,300 years. Seals dead only 30 years, dated 4,600. Muscle tissue from the scalp of a mummified ox found frozen in Alaska, dated 24,000, yet the hair from the same ox dated 7,200. You get inconsistencies. Again, with this method, even when you date it again with the same. So these dating methods are not foolproof, but I would say that if, you're within, 500 years or, 30 years to 300 years with carbon 14, these become pretty accurate just by that method, I've been told. So that method is fairly good, but it doesn't do evolution any good, say. Doesn't do the theory of evolution any good to date something that's pretty accurate to 400 or 500 years. So they don't care about that. They really care about the radiometric is what they care about. And here's an example, and I know you can't see this, but this was interesting. This was sent in by Apologetics Press at the time Burke Thompson was still in there, and Brad Harrop. They reported the following. In 1990, samples of various dinosaur bones were submitted for carbon-14 dating to the University of Arizona's Department of Geoscience. The bones of an Allosaurus, and there's another one there, were among those sent to undergo a blind test. In other words, they didn't tell the technicians where they came from. They mixed them in with some other bones and asked for testing. Amazingly, the oldest C14 date assigned to the bones was 16,120 years, and the Allosaurus sample B was 23,760. And they didn't know where the bones came from and that they were dinosaurs, and they should have been a lot more. They used the methods, and that's the dates, and that's the official date there. And I made, this is the 16,120, which matches this one. This one's only 9,800. I went back in the book and looked, and I was going to put that on the slide, but it really does say in the book 23,760. It doesn't match the 9,400, but I went ahead and put it in as the book had stipulated. But that's the official document, signed, sealed, and delivered. August 10th, 1990 is when that was put out. But it shows you how bogus that is. By the way, as soon as they found out that that was the case, they reneged on this. They said that that was a false reading, that was a false everything. We take back what we have published, and so on and so forth immediately. So there you go. Both dates, of course, are a far cry from the millions of years that they purport that dinosaurs disappeared. Then you have your third method, which are population statistics and so on and so forth. These include that and the inflection of minerals in the ocean. Most of these reveal a young age, and again, none of these are in the textbooks. They only reveal the old age, possibilities in the textbooks. A list of 76 calculations by Morris in his article, The Young Earth, are based on the same uniformitarian assumptions that we talked about last week. And they assume closed systems, constant rates, no initial daughter components. Interestingly, aside from a few duplicates, if you look at that, 75 of the dates have to be wrong. In addition, the oldest date on that list is 500 million years, which doesn't come close to the 4.6 billion that evolutionists claim the Earth to be. Population stats. There's a lot of information in this and a lot of verbiage, and I'm going to try to get some of it, but I'm going to move ahead if we don't get too far, because I want to get to some that's very interesting further down the line. And again, all these slides are in hard copy out in the foyer, and you can easily pick them up. Population growth calculations are another method. Average family size today worldwide, 3.6 children. Hard to get that 0.6 child, with an annual growth rate of 2%. Statisticians have developed formulas allowing for deaths, wars, disease, and other factors affecting growth rate as reflected in the past 4,000 to 5,000 years of recorded history. Using these formulas and projecting a conservative increase of 2.4 children per couple, having a lifespan of 42 years and allowing only 1 million years for growth, giving them the benefit of the doubt, versus the 3 to 4 million evolution claims man's been on the Earth. We get a number beyond any possibility. The number equals 1 times 10 to the 5,000th people, which would now inhabit the Earth. And to put this in perspective, our known universe at 20 billion light years in diameter could only hold no more than 1 times 10 to the 100th people. We've multiplied that 500-fold if this was true. It just doesn't add up. Using calculation figures of around 6,000 years, however, for the Earth, with the same formula, we get 4.34 billion people, and it's close to what we have. And in these slides, what I did, I went online and I got an evolutionist response, something we haven't done before, but this is a rebut from an evolutionist. His name is Dave Matson. And just to let you know what you're up against when somebody comes and says, you give this argument and you get somebody, how good, he's got a writing out, how good are these young age arguments. And Matson stated that the population statistics cannot be figured on an exponential basis. That to do so would indicate that germs, for instance, would now completely cover the Earth 100 miles up. Also, he stated, when man lived in scattered tribal groups, which he did for 99% of his history, Okay, Matson's going back to evolution and saying we were cavemen for 99% of our history. The net human population was 0 for most of the time. And here's my rebut for that. The correct formulas used to calculate population growth have accounted for all the factors that he's negating in here. And they have not been figured on a simple exponential basis. It's obvious that germ count, for instance, similar to insect counts, such as fly reproduction rates and so on and so forth, based on an exponential, does not take into account nature's checks. God has provided for nature's checks in this, which would, neutralize this. The main fallacy in Matson's argument is the comment that man lived in scattered tribes most of this amount of time with a 0 growth rate. First, we're to believe that man has been here 4 million years, and realizing that doesn't work, his suggestion is made that for all but a few hundred years, man's growth rate was 0 due to his inability to find another tribe. A general increase over all human history has been established. If we take any increase over that much time, we get an impossible situation. That's it. The argument fails to alter that conclusion. Okay. The rest of these are pretty much, we'll look at another few here. Decay of Earth's magnetic field. Of Earth's 3 known force fields, gravitational, electrical, and magnetic, the magnetic field resulting from huge electrical currents surrounding Earth's core is decaying. And that's true, it is decaying. Acknowledged by scientists that by the year 3991 AD, it will have completely degenerated. For over 130 years, they've been measuring this thing. Exact values have been recorded, indicated a rather rapid decay rate. The magnetic field has a half-life of 1,400 years, meaning that every 1,400 years it loses half of its strength. The problem for evolutionists is that if you go backwards, any time at all, more than a few thousand years, we end up with an impossible, possibly large magnetic field surrounding this Earth. Dr. Thomas Barnes, a professor of physics at the University of Texas, El Paso, confirmed the upper limits of the rate to be 10,000 years for this Earth. If we were to go back in time further than this, the magnetic field would be so large as to split the Earth in half. And again, we're basing this on not on our assumptions as to rates or so on and so forth. This is evolution. We talked about uniformitarianism. They believe that everything has gone on as it has from the beginning of time. The present is the key to the past. All rates have been the same. Okay, we'll take that for what it's worth. And you say that, okay, rates have been the same. Well, so has the decay rate of the magnetic field. Rate's the same. We go back. We know what the rate is now. We've calculated for the last 100 years, 130 years. Take it back 10,000 years. What's happened? We couldn't be here. What are they going to say? They just ignore it. They ignore it. Here's evolutionist response. Matson says, today, no one is, with any serious work of Earth's magnetic field, envisioned its source to be, he gets real deep here, free electric current is in a spherical conductor undergoing a simple decay. I'm going to get into this with you, which postulates a shifting of energy to a different mode rather than decay. He's dodging the question. These studies showing decay of the magnetic field are actually fluctuations due to polarity reverses confirmed in a record of over 3 billion years. The data showing an exponential decay curve cannot be ruled out, but it cannot be absolutely proved either. Therefore, we can safely relegate this theory to the junk heap of a crackpot idea. It lacks scientific integrity and so on and so forth. Here's the summary. This theory has less support than the correct theory. The reason for its being insisted on is that it allows for an alternative explanation of the decay that we record. However, it goes against the clear evidence for what we recorded. There is evidence in the rocks themselves of a reversal in polarity of Earth's magnetic field. However, the creationists suggest the flood as the source of this, as well as the start of a more rapid decay rate. The charge that decay rates are temporary due to some polarity reversal are unfounded, and the suggestion that these reversals have increased in the field rather than sped up the decay rate is also unfounded. Bottom line, the magnetic field is decreasing. There's no question about that, and it's measurable. And even if Madsen acknowledges this, he did acknowledge this, one cannot rule this out, is his comment. His final comment is very revealing as to, creationists being unprofessional. One can get out of this debate. Okay, I know it's kind of deep, but nonetheless, you can see there are things going on out there. And even if you look at things like the magnetic rate, decay rate, I mean, we have proof that if you go back, you can argue with an evolutionist and bring this up. And it goes right, it plays right into what they believe in as far as a uniform rate. And that's the kind of thing they come back at. It's just some wild theory of something else going on. But basically, it's measurable, it's decaying. You cannot say anything, why is it decaying? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It has not. You're right. You're right. Let's see. This is the. Let's do one more of these, and then I want to go to the helium. I think this is Age of the Sun. You can read about this. Apologize. I got a lot of verbiage in here, but it is interesting. Here's helium. Let's get into this. Helium's currently accumulating in our atmosphere predominantly from decay of uranium and thorium within the Earth's crust. It has been recorded for years. There's not enough helium in our atmosphere to correspond to the alleged old age for this Earth that evolutionists say we are. Known rate of influx of helium into our atmosphere indicates the age less than 10,000 years. This is measurable. Along with the above, the fact that helium remains in these elements within the Earth's crust, such as uranium and others, and is in process of releasing to the atmosphere is another testament to a young Earth. Because if it's old as they say, these elements would have long ago been devoid of helium. It would have already dispensed out, and they're not. They're still in process of decaying. Evolutionists' response: in order to explain the difficulty, evolutionary scientists have suggested that the excess helium has somehow overcome Earth's gravity and escaped out into our atmosphere. This they claim is due to excess heat in Earth's outer atmosphere, or exosphere, and between 1800 and 2300 degrees of Celsius, and polar winds caused by some 20 reversals of Earth's magnetic field over the past 3.5 million years, throwing off this helium into outer space. Here's the summary. There's simply no evidence whatsoever for either of these. It's just a guess. In our exosphere temps or the polar winds, there's no evidence that our exosphere reaches these temperatures. One would expect that we could measure our own atmosphere, the temperatures just outside of our direct atmosphere in our exosphere, and be able to tell that. The polar winds are purely speculation based on extensive time and questionable assumptions. Bottom line, if helium has no way to escape, it has simply been accumulating for that long. The elements within Earth's crust still in process of decaying into helium, and the indication of a young age is unchallengeable, period. Let me jump. Sorry about about that. This is interesting. I want to get into this a little bit with you before we lose time. This is contradictory evidence. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there's evidence of human occupation within all this strata that we've been talking about. That evolution says these strata are this million years old. It starts with the Precambrian, the Cambrian, and on up, and they're 600 million all the way up to a 500,000 or so. But you have indication that mankind has been in darn near all of it, all of these layers. And I wanted to show you some of these examples, and these are true evidences. Here is a chart, and we're going to see some of this. This is the column we looked at last week. There's the lowest. And remember, we talked about the Precambrian has literally nothing in it in the way of fossils. And then you get to the Cambrian, and it has an explosion of all of the. It just begs that there was like a creation, if you were, of fossils and whatnot. Albeit the fact that creationists believe that this whole column that has been purported to be, laid down slowly over millions and billions of years was actually the result of the flood, the global flood of Noah. And all this strata was just a result of that, because you have, it's all over this planet, and those layers have been laid down. I think we talked about it can be laid down rapidly, and things get caught up in it. And it makes sense if you look at it that slower, and like the fossils and the trilobites, they would be in the lower sections. If you think about a flood approaching and water rising, slower creatures that are trying to escape it, they would be covered over first. Mankind and larger, more creatures would try to escape it. They would go higher and higher, being in the higher strata of something like that. And you look at it from that perspective, it makes sense that you would find, but evolution turns that around and says no, that's how it's dated. But I wanted to show you in this session that in these same, I try to line them up, but they have found human. We're going to look at this in just a second. Human prints. They've found spoons in the Mississippian, carvings with human footprints in here, human skeletons in the Cretaceous period, human skulls in this period. It's just here we go. We've got about 10 minutes here. I'll just try to breeze through here. These are the Cambrian seas. According to evolution, trilobite, we just talked about, it's a marine arthropod, emerged from the Cambrian period 500 to 600 million years ago. We looked at this critter as, when we talked about design, but the eye of the trilobite being just phenomenal in God's design of this. There's been nothing like it, I don't believe, as far as its complexity. And they flourished at the bottom, according to evolution, all those years ago. Well, just so happens that around 1968, William Meister, and he was exploring near Utah, Delta. He had a team of people with him, and they were walking along, and one of the rocks fell off close to them and split in half. And lo and behold, there was it was a human sandal, and embedded in that sandal was a trilobite. And it's, where is it here? It's right there. And it was mirror image. It wasn't something that could be easily faked, because it was opened up and it was mirror imaged on both sides, and there were a number of witnesses. And you could say, well, they were all creationists and that was just faked all the way. But it has not been refuted, and it is still around as evidence. Of course, it's not being exposed by evolutionists or in any way, shape, or form. But there you are. A human sandal print with one of these 600 million year old supposedly trilobites embedded in the sandal print, and you cannot argue with it. And there's a whole story on that if you want to investigate it. It's in the resources that I've got. When you think of coal, what do you think of? You think of millions of years. You think of a slow process. This is the evolutionary model that They were formed, a gradual buildup of plant material, millions of years being buried, subjected to heat and pressure. Supposedly takes 1,000 years to form an inch of coal. Also takes 10 feet of plant material to form 1 foot of peat, 12 feet of peat to form 1 foot of coal. Therefore, 10 feet of coal seam, 1,200 feet of plant material needed. Problem, in hundreds of years, we observed no plant matter accumulating in this way in the swamps in this country. If coal is formed by evolution, as they suggest, we would expect to find a graduation of coal quality by rank and quality as we move from lower levels. We don't. Yeah, let's see here. Let me jump here. Composition of plant life within the coal seams is another problem that we have. If most coal formed within peat collecting in swamps, why do we have a wide variety of in the swamp dwelling organisms in coal? We find a diversity of plant life from wet, dry, cold, and warm regions, all within this. It's a mixture of fossils. No evolutionary changes are observed in the plant life. Preservation of plant fossils in all coal deposits. We find fossils of leaves and tissues of plants so well preserved, it's hard to believe that they decayed or they were in there for any length of time. You see if I can jump here. Evidence of human remains within coal. This is carboniferous material. This is 300 million old, suppose. This is a human skull found within, embedded in coal. Let's see here. The finds are documented, have been verified. There's the article they're found in. These are tools that were found in 1912. An employee of this electrical plant in Oklahoma broke open a chunk of coal and found this. There's a cup. There's a coalified axe handle. There's there's where it was embedded. They pulled it out. There's the cup in the coal, so on and so forth. I don't know if I've breezed by this or not, but in Freiburg, Germany, they had a train trestle, and they had the pylons, and it was wood, and they wanted to change it over to metal to strengthen it, and they had a crane that would just literally yank these things out of the ground, and the bottom third is 100 years old. They pulled these pylons out, and they had completely coalified the last third over 100 years, and it was solid coal, and a good quality of coal too. See here, thimble. These are examples of thimble. Iron hammer. Footprints. We haven't looked at that too much. Crustaceous. They found complete family buried. Skeletons of 10 perfectly modern humans, 58 feet down in Dakota sandstone in 1990. 5 males, 4 females, and an infant were recovered. No explanation. Here's a human footprint that was found in New Mexico. In the July issue of Smithsonian Magazine, ran an article, acknowledged the find, but they said that what appeared to be a large mammal and a bird track that evolved long after the Permian period. So they looked at that footprint and said it was a large unidentified mammal that made that. They didn't publish the picture though in the textbook. They just identified it. They made a find in the coal seam, and they just identified it by verbiage. This is, we talk about fossilization. This is one that they found is taking a super long time. This is one they call the limestone cowboy. This is one where they found a boot with a fossilized bone. And they talk about stalactites, 1 minute. And this is, in the textbooks you see stalactites and stalagmites. Millions of years it took to make this thing. Here's a case that it didn't, and this is evidence beneath the George Rogers Clark Memorial in Vincennes, Indiana, and it leached into the basement of this, and water seeping down through made this 5 columns, 11 feet tall, all found in the basement of this, and they're 45 years old. And it looks just like the ones in Mammoth Cave or the one out in Arizona, a stalactite, stalagmite. So these things can form rapidly. And even, we didn't, I think it's in the slide, I breezed right by it, but in the coal example, I think evolutionists have acknowledged that coal can form quickly now, both in the lab and in nature. But in nature, their excuse now is that it forms quickly, but it has stayed there for millions of years, and we've discovered it. It's this kind of thing that they tell us. Okay, that's it. I think that's the last one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your attention.